Sure. So we have an interesting conversation with a man named Ken Kurson, who most people probably haven't heard of, but maybe should have. He's a political operative. He's former editor-in-chief of the New York Observer. He's an early crypto investor, and he's on the board of the cryptocurrency Ripple. And he's a friend and speechwriter for the current president of the United States. So really interesting. Oh, and also he's in a rock band, which we'll get into as well. So really interesting.
So switching gears, you mentioned the advisory councils and software. You're part of a whole other world aside from politics and media, specifically the software that drives cryptocurrency. How did you get interested in that?
You know, you made the remark that I have a Zelig-like career, but to me that all comes together. My obsession with politics and with money kind of combined in this really frightening time in 2008 when the entire economy was collapsing. And I was starting to see that the way governments were going to deal with this collapse, some would be responsible. And I'll give President Bush and President Obama some credit for assessing the seriousness of the situation. But it was really clear to me that the world economies were going to mostly solve this problem by printing money. And that's a solution that didn't work in 1930s Germany. It's not working in 2018 Venezuela. I think there have been instances, and I'm so afraid to sound at all, even for a moment, like Paul Krugman, who I hate with the intensity of 1,000 suns. But I do agree that there have been instances where money creation is, I don't want to say responsible, but a necessary sort of function, a necessary way to give like a, what do they call those paddles they put on you when you need CPR? It's like
defibrillators.
Yeah, defibrillator. Yeah, it's sort of financial defibrillator. But in almost all other instances, when governments print money, it's to cover up their own failures to responsibly deploy it. And I was seeing that so clearly in 2008 that I kept thinking, this digital stuff that Chris was talking about, it has a future. I don't know what it's going to look like. I'd never heard of Bitcoin. But then in like 2011, and I'm not super into like the programming world. I'm not really in touch with all these message board guys. You know, the ones who look like Plague from the Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. But I started to hear it percolating around. I was looking into it as a journalist, and I bought my first Bitcoin in I think 2012 for about $90, and I remember thinking, "This is terrible. Everyone else paid, 50 cents. Why am I paying almost $100?" And then that same guy, Chris Larsen, became the CEO of Ripple, which is a currency that shares some attributes with Bitcoin. Not a lot. I mean, it's a cryptocurrency, but it's validated totally differently, and has a real. Bitcoin doesn't care what you use it for, which is one of its attributes. It's one of the reasons people like it. Whereas Ripple has a very specific usage, which is remittances in foreign currencies. So I started to get really interested in it. I started to invest. I invested in the company in the very first day. I bought a bunch of its token, which is called XRP. I think I paid mostly half a cent for the ones I bought. And as you know, I've eventually joined the board of Ripple because I've been a consistent investor for a long time.
So if you think about the Venn diagram between sort of politics, banking, central banking, technology, software, you're really sort of in the middle of all of that.
I appreciate you saying that. I'm watching those worlds really closely. The regulatory world is part of it too.
Yes.
And like it kind of bums me out that that there's going to soon be a regulatory patchwork, that these cryptocurrencies, which have existed in this sort of utopia of no rules, but I also see how important it is to get some regulations, because the whole thing, there's just too much opportunity for pain. I don't know when this is going to air, but you're interviewing me in the midst of so far the greatest crash there's ever been in the crypto world. And so, as you tell your friends,
how do you react to that? Is we're sitting in the middle of it?
I react fine. I mean, for one thing, my cost basis is so low that my personal investments, it doesn't really
Not
matter.
just as an investor, but as someone who's an enthusiast of the technology.
Yeah, I think it's so important. I mean, I've been very, very troubled to see literally every day new coins come with some bullshit story about how they're going to solve this or that problem, and some don't even pretend to solve a problem. They're just out and out gags, and then they're worth $100 million the next day. That is not a healthy environment for wealth creation. It's not quite a Ponzi scheme because it's more of like a public Ponzi scheme. It's like advertising something. This is a Ponzi scheme. Get in and get out before the last guy, and that's just not healthy. People, when you say on your Facebook or social media that you're into this digital currencies, there's always some smartass who says, "Oh yeah, it'll be great, just like the Dutch tulip crisis." But what they never say when they're talking about Dutch tulips, which has become shorthand for a crash of some investment, or Beanie Babies that never should have been worth as much as it got to, they never talk about the guy who sold at the top. Right? Always the image that's supposed to come to mind is the poor schmuck who took who took a second mortgage on his house to buy Dutch tulips or Beanie Babies or Ethereum, and is now left holding the bag. But if he did take that second mortgage to buy it, he bought it from someone, and that there's someone who sold Bitcoins at 18,000. There's someone who sold XRP at $3.35. There's someone who sold Beanie Babies at God knows how much. So until you get through your head that every investment that's ever been, including the stocks that I'm watching have incredible volatile days right now, for every loser there's a winner, and that's just how investing works. So I welcome some sensible, calming regulation to this world.
Ken, you're also well known in New York media circles, at least, for being a practitioner of the Stoic philosophy. What does that mean?
I'm not a brilliant practitioner or even salesman for it, although it's meant a lot to me and really helped me in my life. I'm an observant Jew, and that's where I take most of my philosophy. But I've been stunned the more I study Stoicism, how neatly it fits together. And the key thing about Stoicism is when you're not very familiar with it, there's this sort of popular conception that a Stoic, can like hit his hand with a hammer and not yell "ouch," and that's just ridiculous. That has nothing to do with it. But there is an acceptance that you should control what you can control, and not worry so much about what you can't control. And that's been had a huge impact on me. Like the story I told you earlier about writing that controversial speech for Donald Trump. I knew it would create a lot of attention. I knew that some of it would be negative attention, but I was okay with it. I made my mind up, and I sort of got to this place of where I wasn't going to let other people determine whether I was happy or sad for the day. I made my decision. I was okay with it, and I was at peace with it, and that's really the contribution that Stoicism has made to my life. This sort of understanding that there's so much in my life that I can't control. I just got to focus on the stuff I can have an effect on.
So speaking of focus and being at peace, tell us about your career as a punk rock musician, which seems on its face to be on the opposite end of every conceivable continuum from Stoicism.
Yeah, well, music's my passion in life. I've been
promised you a wide-ranging conversation. I mean, everything from Rudy Giuliani to Trump to cryptocurrencies and punk rock bands there. That's just about got everything in it there. It's funny. I never get tired of talking about the Trump phenomenon. But, each time you do, you have to try, no matter how hard it is, to leave your political bias at the door and just hear people's opinions. Discard what you want, but taking umbrage with someone else's opinion because it's not the same as yours is frankly what got us into this situation in the first place. So, we really do have to try and broaden the political discourse if we're ever going to try and get back to some kind of centrist understanding. And I think that was a fascinating discussion there with Ken.
Yeah, it's interesting because I am here in New York, and not a surprise, I don't have a lot of friends who are pro-Trump. So the exposure I get to people who are more supportive of the president comes in the form of pieces where, either people on Twitter or people writing things or people appearing in the news who are very pro-Trump, maybe because they work for him or because they have some special interest. But Kirsten is someone who really likes the guy and really admires him, and thinks of him as a great communicator, and thinks he has all these strengths. So it was actually really refreshing to hear a kind of sober take on, why the president's doing a good job and could ultimately be reelected if the economy keeps doing well, but also just how as Trump the man is there's a way to see him other than the monster that so many in the New York bubble might tend to see him as.